if you compare for a pretty large set of forests, we had 70, at the time of this study, we had 76 officially designated parks, reserved government parks. And then we have, at that time, we've still got more now, but we had 87 non-parks. Well, that's private, that's community, that is commercial for timber. It's a full array. And we were then looking at the forester's evaluation of vegetation density, and the evaluation varied from very sparse to very abundant. I don't think any of you are going to find any significant relationship in that table. So, officially designated forests against every other county. And there's no statistical difference between vegetation density in those forests, as measured by the foresters just completed it. Well, if formal designation doesn't make a difference, what does? And what we are finding is that when the users themselves monitor, that makes a difference. So we've done a number of studies, a cross-sectional study of 178 user groups, and found that when members of the forestry user group, not the government, the user group monitors, forest conditions are better, and we have a very strong statistical relationship between regular monitoring now in forest density, controlling for formal organization, dependence on forests and social capital, I'm going to go on to, given time, the impact of formally designated tenure. Here we have looking, these are now the same forest measured twice, so now we can use the forest measuration because it's controlling same forest over time. And we looked at ownership. Did government, community, or private make any difference? And did we learn that the users were involved in monitoring? And what you find in terms of formal ownership, it made no difference in DBH, diameter breast height, no difference in basal area, no interest in stem count. And these are very critical measures of forest condition, not the only ones, but very important. On the other hand, we looked at were the users themselves monitoring? And we found there that changes in basal area and changes in stem count were very positively related to users themselves monitoring. A finding that is quite surprising and now has been supported by a lot of other studies. Two recent studies in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science and several other journal articles that keep coming up and finding the same thing. So, what have we learned overall? Well, protecting common pool resources, and say here in the developing country, but I mean almost anywhere. It's a challenge, it's difficult, and governments sometimes do it. But it's usually costly, and it can create some difficult problems, especially if you take indigenous people and push them out, and then you replace them, and you have the forest disappear because of stealing. So sometimes it does deprive people who have been stewards for a long time. It may or may not protect the resources. And it is, what we're finding, that it is appropriate for some large tracts of relatively isolated forests. So there are places where if somebody were asking what we should do, I would say go protected area, because there are not enough people around, they don't have an incentive, and this is where it's not a bad idea at all to get it protected now, while it's far away. But this involvement of local users is very important and not in our theory books. So I'm hoping all of you will be doing some future studies and we can get even more data that supports this, because people don't even ask this question. We did, because I was seeing in irrigation systems that the farmers were monitoring one another, and we got it in the lab. We could show it in the lab, so we did it. One of the real problems now is that sometimes 20 to 30 years ago, we took away a local forest or a local irrigation or a local fishery and made it government, and now sometimes we're returning it. And I've gone to some of the meetings where we return. We have a big audience, bring in a bunch of people, say, oh, we're glad you're here. And for an hour, we tell people, okay, now you own, you control. Well, you don't own, you manage. You're the managers. And here are the rules. And then an hour later, they're gone. So in 1 hour, supposedly, you're supposed to turn over land or a water system that people used to manage, and then you took it away from them. Now you're giving it back. And those don't all work. External financial incentives may reduce overharvesting, but they have to be sustained over time and monitored in a way that people get trust. And I'll come back to this whole problem of if we don't have trust, we really don't get anywhere. So the big lessons that I'm trying to get at is beware, warning. Assuming that changing the formal tenure is efficient public policy, as is written in a lot of our textbooks and a lot of World Bank and other reports, it's not sufficient in the field. A lot of the biosphere reserves, the maps were drawn in a national capital with a bingo and national government sitting down for an hour and a half and drawing a map. Well, then the people on the ground found out that this had happened, but they weren't involved. Pretty hard. And I hope that you can see a bit of the multiple methods. I'm not able to show you the full array, but that you can see that it complements when you are able to look at multiple methods about the same question. So thank you very much for listening. And if there are questions, I'll be glad to take them. In the middle. Yes.
It's an honor to have you here. I'm a professor at Cedar Crest College, as well, Women's College across the valley. And a great follower of you. I wish I had brought a book for you to sign. My question has to do with trust. I'm a great reader of Michael Storper. You might be aware. We recently talked about the issues of homogeneous groups versus heterogeneous groups, and the degree with which each group has its own benefits and merits and costs. I'm wondering if you might comment about trust building within heterogeneous groups or homogeneous groups that are attempting to be more heterogeneous.
It's a challenge, and we don't have a single answer. We know from the work of Scott Page that diverse groups that have diversity are usually better at problem solving. And he has done there's a whole book that Scott Page has just out recently on diversity, and it's excellent. Heterogeneous groups bring diverse ideas to the table. And one of the issues why it is important to have more women involved in forestry groups than used to be, they used to be excluded, is that they have a lot of knowledge about what's going on in the forest today. And as many more forest groups involve women in a significant way, they're finding that they're gaining new insights and new ways. On the other hand, there are some forms of heterogeneity that can be counterproductive. So again, this head-end, tail-end problem in water is a big one. And we found a very interesting relationship when the head end is right next to a canal that has been built in the last 5 years, and there's not much need to get labor in the spring getting ready for monsoon season. the head enders grab it all. In head ends where there's a lot of need for repair and maintenance, etc., the tail enders have some bargaining power. Oh, you want us to work for 10 days this season? You didn't let us get any water last year, so why should we work for you? And so it isn't one of these one-to-one, anytime there's heterogeneity, it is bad or good. And it's then also how do the people work out rules that moderate some of the adverse effects of heterogeneity. But it's a very important variable for us to include in our data.